I ran to the roof, got my neighbors up, and we watched as the second plane hit the South Tower. And I saw that with my own eyes. This question I'm asked constantly. How did I end up going to seminary and becoming an ordained minister? Well, it started with one pivotal moment that changed my life. If you'd like to know what this has to do with thought work and you, then this is your episode. Let's go.
I'm Dr. Charlie Hornis, highly anxious people pleaser turned master certified professional life coach. Learning to manage my brain was so life-changing for me that I got certified so that I could teach these incredible evidence-based practices to you. Are you ready for massive change? Let's go.
Hey, friend, welcome to the Art of Managing Your Brain podcast. I'm Dr. Charlie Hornis, and I'm just going to take a really hot minute for a quick shameless brag. First off, my oldest son has turned 13. So yes, we have a teenager in the house. But more importantly, he loves the Red Hot Chili Peppers. We were totally rocking out to Scar Tissue this morning in Carline as of this recording. So big shout out to all the Gen X moms out there because we are bringing the parenting thunder. Speaking of, if you're a Gen X mom or if you're a parent at all like me and you are navigating the bananas-ness of screens and tweens and teens and smartphones and dragging your kids out of the house to go play, touch grass, and hug trees, which again, as a Gen Xer, I will never understand this. I was out all day. You couldn't get me in the house. You couldn't get me in shoes. You couldn't get me home before it was dark. I mean, I drank out of the hose and ate dirt and, we're great. But I digress. If you're a parent dealing with the bananas of devices and tech, then I have a platform that you have to use. It's called Bark. And if you've not heard about it, it's amazing. I've been using Bark with my kids since 2020 on any device they get their hands on. And it is fantastic at this age where consequences are really low and you can really teach about responsibility online. This is the only platform that lets me see potential threats and questionable behavior and conversations or websites without actually invading my kids' privacy. It's not about control. It's just about safety. It's about awareness. And it's about teaching them early that they can ruin their entire lives with just a text. This platform gives me incredible peace of mind. It has for the last 5 years. I've only thought about it recently because I now have a teenager that I'm actually starting to get concerned about, this phase in his life. And I just thought, gosh, this platform brings me so much peace of mind. I thought I would share it with you guys. So they've got like a watch, a phone, a home thing that monitors your TV and internet. It's very cool. And then they have the parental app that just can monitor all the devices in one place. So it's also extremely convenient. If you want to give it a free trial, you can go to my link at charliehorniscoaching.com/bark. That's charliehorniscoaching.com/bark, BARK. Way before I ever even imagined being a parent, there was a pivotal moment. I was standing, I'll never forget this. I was standing on the corner of Park Avenue, staring down towards Grand Central Station. I was waiting for the light to change so I can cross the street. A messenger bag slung across my shoulder, a stack of matte black and white headshots. Yes, black and white back in the day, a stack of them in hand. And I couldn't stop thinking to myself, what in the hell am I doing? What am I doing? I just left an audition. It'd been an audition for one of those fake sweetener commercials, fake sugar. And when I left and looked around the room, there were about 50 women in there. Every single one of them looked almost exactly like me. Same hair, same face, same scripted smile. So they were looking for a particular look that happened to be me and iterations of me. It was the weirdest thing. I'd never really noticed that before. And in that moment, I felt like I was watching myself from the outside. Like I wasn't auditioning for a role. I was trying to validate my own existence in some, strange dimension. It was in that moment, standing on that corner, that I knew that I was done, because that was the day I quit. I didn't quit acting that day because of fake sugar. I quit because I realized that the role I'd been playing this entire time, the role was my actual life. And it wasn't just in the industry, it was in my family, in my friendships, in my own reflection, looking back at me. So today we're talking about the moment that maybe you can relate to, that I walked away from my professional acting and commercial print modeling career, 10 years in, union cards in hand, because I couldn't pretend anymore. Not in the audition room, not in my life, but more importantly, we're talking about your performative performance, the one that you didn't choose, the one that was trained into you. So if you've ever felt like you're carrying a version of yourself the world applauds while the real you stays unseen, stay with me. This one might change something for you. And I call this performative confidence. And I have a whole episode I'm going to do on this, but this is us performing confidence. You are performing confidence so well that often your closest friends don't even see the cracks. I mean, sometimes they do, but often they don't. Well, you're not alone, and you don't have to carry all of this alone. Now, your mental health is super important to me. That is a passion of mine. And Mental Health Awareness Month is coming up around the corner. So I just want to remind you that part of our episodes this spring are sponsored by BetterHelp. We've partnered with them to get the word out about connecting people to licensed therapists online and on your schedule. And it is affordable, more so and more convenient than traditional therapy. And you're going to get 10% off your first month when you use my partner link, which is betterhelp.com/art of. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/art of. And you'll get that 10% off to give therapy a try. But the reason that therapy is so much of a passion of mine is because I know what a superpower it is, what a game changer it is. Therapy is the super success tool that you need. It is the preemptive strike that you need. And I know this because I was raised in trauma and therapy was a game changer. You know, my nervous system never trusted stillness, and performance, that became my safety net. You know, I was cast early on as the girl who had it together and didn't dare disappoint until I was no longer that person and it all came crashing down. And yet, deep down, there'd always been this whisper that I was meant to do something else, be something else. It was a call I ignored, a call that I ran away from, a call that ultimately I ended up right out of high school in New York City and running from it as fast as I could. I can tell you, I really relate to Jonah some days. So let me say something to you that took me 30 years to learn. Sometimes ambition is just fear in a fancy outfit. You see, I didn't choose acting because it brought me joy necessarily. I mean, sure, I was good at it. I was good enough to be a small town Texas girl and won nearly an entire full ride to undergraduate in New York City at an acting conservatory on auditioning. So, you know, I didn't suck. And I graduated, and then I launched my first career as a professional union card carrying actress and commercial print model in New York City. I did a lot of very cool stuff. I have modeled on a whole bunch of romance novel covers, which strangely enough were some of the coolest, most professional jobs I'd ever had. Just amazing. And they paid really well. But yeah, I'm out there on a bunch of like Harlequin romance novels. I once got bum rushed in Duffy Square in Times Square because I was the stand-in for Catherine Zeta-Jones. Because back in the day when I was young and hot, I looked like her. And I was in her color cover, and it was the Saturday before Christmas. So it was like the busiest day of the year, and it was nighttime. And security brought me out, and I was, doing all her marks and, doing her lighting and all the things, saying her lines and getting everything ready because she, then she's going to show up and shoot the scene. No big deal. And people thought from a distance behind barriers that I was her. And they totally broke the barriers and from all sides came rushing in, and we were lighting up for a taxi, and security shoved me into this taxi. And it was back when we had those little digital cameras. Remember those little guys with the armband, and we were really cool, early 2000s. And people were shoving those in my face and taking my pictures. And so a ton of lovely tourists in New York City took home pictures of this face, not Catherine Zeta-Jones. So I got a lot of stories. I did some national commercials, and yeah, it's whatever. Nothing you would know. The back of my head walking upstairs is pretty famous, just so you know. Even with all of that, I had never been still enough, quiet enough, that still small voice to creep in, to ever even ask the question, because of especially everything that I endured as a kid, to ever ask the question if I was happy doing that job. I chose it because disappearing into somebody else had turned out to be the safest thing I could ever do than being myself. The stage, it gave me applause, and applause felt like love to a little girl who had endured that much at her age. There was acceptance, approval, appreciation, praise, all of the things a child starved of desperately craves. I mean, I was 6 years old when I discovered the peace of being on stage and the peace it gave me without, ever asking myself why. I loved being able to hide behind a character, behind a mask, and be me without being me. There was nothing more freeing about that. And without even asking myself, I dove straight into a career that I'm not entirely sure that I ever fully chose. But what nobody tells you is that applause and acceptance and approval and praise, I say this all the time, they're moving targets and they can be taken away. They're conditional, and conditions are cages. And the deeper I got into the industry, the more I realized I wasn't chasing a dream. I was fleeing from a wound that I'd simply slapped a Band-Aid on and utterly ignored. I had become a professional at ignoring deep, festering, soul-wrenching wounds. So what happened to make me quit acting on that particular day? I was living in Williamsburg, Brooklyn on 9/11, and I had been home for maybe an hour of sleep after, one of my moonlighting bartending jobs when, I was in between gigs, and I got a call right after 8 something, and it was my boyfriend, who happened to be Israeli, and he was getting out of the subway and had a direct view of the Twin Towers, and when he came up, he saw the North Tower on fire, and immediately called me. It was right after the plane had hit, and the first thing he said to me was, it was a terrorist attack. And he was able to get through to me right before all the cell towers went down. And it's probably why I will always have a landline for the rest of my life. I run up to the roof of my Williamsburg apartment, because Williamsburg is literally directly across the East River from Manhattan's financial district. And so we had a spectacularly horrible view. I ran to the roof, got my neighbors up, and we watched as the second plane hit the South Tower. And I saw that with my own eyes, and it was devastating. And then we watched the towers fall in real time, and nobody thought that was going to happen. It was truly one of the most surreal moments of my entire life. Sometimes when I hear sirens from first responders that go on just a little bit too long, I get these kind of physiological flashbacks that are hard to describe. But I think all we heard were constant sirens 24/7 for the entire next week until the L line was reopened and we were allowed to go back into the city to go to work. And that's a whole nother story, because when we got into Union Square, it was like martial law. I mean, there were Army Humvees everywhere and people walking around with gigantic guns and camo. And flak jackets or whatever you call them. We'd never seen that kind of stuff. That's not, what we've grown up with here in the US necessarily. Almost 25 years. It's hard to believe that I watched that with my own eyes and that it happened. And that day, something cracked wide open in me, wide. It always been there, but it just like shattered, opened. The big questions that I'd always been tempted to wrestle with, but I had always worked so hard to just kind of shove down, deep down. These questions, they just started to kind of gush out and I couldn't stop them. They washed over me. They overwhelmed me with this enormity of it all, like the vastness of space or the ocean. And all of a sudden, I couldn't stop thinking about things like, why do people kill people because of religion or over God? Why do we spend our lives chasing things that don't actually matter? Why am I walking around New York City carrying pictures in a bag of myself to hand to people? Like they'll tell me who I am, who I'm supposed to be. Like they're going to pick me out of a crowd of a sea of brunettes who look exactly like me. Like what is the, it's a eeny, meeny, miny, mo situation. Like what point does that serve humanity? And that was what happened on the corner of Park Avenue to me, waiting for the light to change with tears streaming down my perfectly done up face. I tossed the lot of those black and white matte headshots into the trash bin. I took a deep breath and I pushed forward right into the unknown. But that wasn't the end. It was the beginning. It was just the first crack in the foundation. Act 2, from actress to pivoting into real estate agent and moonlighting as bartender on the side, trying to be helpful, useful, functional, trying to make sense of all of these big questions that I had no answers for. And so I started selling condos in Brooklyn. A friend of mine thought it would be a good idea, that I would be good at it. So I passed the test and I got a job with a broker right there in Williamsburg, just, steps from that apartment that I was in. And everything seemed to be going well until one day, this young couple, two young Manhattanites in love, looking to move into Brooklyn where they could maybe afford the mortgage. They sat across from me after they decided they were going to take an apartment, and they were smiling and they were excited, ready to buy their first home together. And it was several stops out of the L train from the city, but that was, what made this newly renovated, newly constructed hipster condo building all the more attractive. For city prices, and anyway, it was affordable. And they said the magic words: we're getting this place with just $5,000 down. Can you believe it? I can't believe they found a way to make the numbers work. And I froze. They were buying a $500,000 condo, 500 square feet practically, in New York City with an ARM loan and only $5,000 down. $5,000, 3%, and a wing and a prayer. I knew it was wrong. I didn't understand why. I didn't understand the mechanics of it. I knew nothing about mortgage brokering. I had zero experience with mortgage brokers, but I knew physiologically that that didn't make sense. The moral compass within me lit up like a Christmas tree. Something was very wrong, very, very wrong in that moment, because there's no way that that adds up. And suddenly it occurred to me that we were never involved in any of the financial aspects of these deals. So what did I do? Well, I, love to be a loudmouth. I immediately confronted my boss, hoping that there had been some kind of mistake. He says to me, Charlie, your job is to sell condos, close deals, and don't ask questions. Yeah. What do you think I did? I walked out of that day and never looked back. And that was my second final audition that I walked away from with no backup plan. Act 3, small town girl back home in Texas for a visit. After that, I went home to see my family in my small town, Texas town, basically in the middle of another existential crisis. I sat at the brand new Starbucks that had just opened in our town, a Real big deal, by the way, to have a Starbucks. And I was drinking a latte with my home church pastor. Now, my pastor in my home church just so happened to be a woman. She was the only woman minister that I'd ever known, but she was also really the only minister I had ever really known. So for me, even in Texas, for me, a woman minister was entirely normal, entirely normal. And she was amazing at it. And although I had no idea at the time what was happening behind the scenes in church, I thought she was fantastic at her job. And it was in that moment, sitting in that Starbucks, me crying into my latte, that moment seemed to be the first time in my entire life that I'd really ever felt like I'd been listened to, like she heard me in the moment. And she didn't try to fix me. She just listened. She saw me. And that moment for me was sacred, the way that she was able to provide the care that I needed in the moment. And it was in that moment that I knew I couldn't run anymore. I told her what I was carrying, what I couldn't explain. It was like getting clubbed in the head with a pile of bricks. And in the moment I said to her, I want to do what you do. And she said 5 words to me that changed my life. You should go to Union. And I did. And that spring, I was accepted into Union Theological Seminary in New York City, part of Columbia Universities. And I started full-time seminary to get my master's of divinity. I'm going to talk a little more about this story next week, but I just wanted to get some of this out there. And if this story feels a little close to home to you, then you're going to want to go into my masterclass that's coming out on this episode that will go a lot deeper. The Calling You Can't Ignore is a full step-by-step framework that walks you through why burnout is often just misaligned purpose, how to recognize survival. Here's what all of this means for you and what I want to tell you today. This is what I want you to hear. If you've been living on autopilot, if you've been performing instead of choosing, if your body's screaming, but your brain keeps pushing you forward, it's not dysfunction, it's survival. And there's a reason that you're exhausted. It's not because you're lazy, but because you've been trying to become palatable instead of powerful. Your brain is doing what it was taught to do. Stay safe by staying pleasing. Stay safe by any means necessary. That is how we can fall into the trap of performing our whole life. And I'm here to say it. That is not your calling. That's your conditioning. And today, you get to start unraveling it.